Welcome to the Commuter Assistance Strategic Plan Workshop. Today's meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available on the DRPT YouTube channel this week, and a link will be emailed to you as soon as possible. Should you have any technical difficulties during the meeting, please log off and try logging back on, or contact me using the questions panel. We will take written questions during the presentation, and there will be a designated question and comment period following the presentation. With that, I'll hand it over to Chris.
Thank you, Miriam, and good afternoon to all the attendees. I see a couple of are still popping in, but we'll go ahead and get started. So this is the webinar on the Commuter Systems Program Strategic Plan Requirements and Guidance. So we've been talking about this for a little while, and if some of you may recall, we did a draft guidance and requirements document just prior to COVID. We sent that out to all of our grant recipients for comment period, I think in December of 2019, about that time frame, and we got some comments back, and then COVID hit, and so we just suspended, we paused having to do these plans just during the COVID was not a good time to do planning. But COVID seems to be hanging around, but we're in a different place where we can start looking at some things and planning for the future, even with COVID. And I think that's part of the plan, right? Is to try to plan what the effects of COVID are. So we're back at it. We took your comments and suggestions from that comment period, and we have made some more changes in a draft document that is in the handouts section. So if you see your little webinar tool, there's a handout section. You can download the handout. Again, that's in draft form. So if, right now that document, by what we're required to do, since it's a requirements document, it goes out to this website called Virginia Town Hall, and that's where Virginia puts all of its documents that have to go through public review. So it's out there for comments. So you folks have a little bit of time, this month to provide some more feedback, and then we'll finalize that. But the way it is now, it is good enough to go. I don't think we'll make any major changes to the document at this point. It'll just be probably tweaking and maybe making things a little more clearer. But the plan or that document is good enough for you to kind of work off of and to move forward with. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So next slide. So here's our agenda. We'll cover, an overview on why we're doing why are we making you do these plans? Give you a little guidance on what the best way of putting together the plan. You'll hear me say this over and over again. These are data-driven plans. The data is going to tell us what the needs are, and analyzing that data will help you. Will be the way you figure out what services are needed and how you implement those services. Talk about, just to confirm who's required to do one of these strategic plans. We'll talk about the planning horizon, how long the plan has to be, when they have to be completed, how often and when you have to do updates. And then we'll go through very quickly, but this is in the handout document, all the chapters that are required and all the content that's required in the plan. Again, we'll go over the timeline of when these things are due, and then give you a little insight. We've gotten questions already about how do we get funding to actually develop the plan. So we'll talk about that too. And then, as Miriam mentioned, we'll have some time at the end too for more questions and answers. Okay, next one. So overview. So what is this plan? So the reason why this plan is there is or having to do the strategic plan is that we need to plan things out, right? Before we implement something or do something, it's good to have a plan to do it the best way, right? To do it in the way that meets the needs, that's more effective, that's more cost effective. If you don't have a plan and you just kind of do things, you're not necessarily doing it in the best way. And I realize that many of you, or all of you, have had programs for a while, but we've done some plans back in, I don't know, 2013 or so, but they were never really strategic in the content. So it was more of a general plan. So we want to get more strategic and strategize, because that's going to help be more effective, and be more cost effective, but get better results. And so even if you have programs, it's a great opportunity to evaluate what you're doing, to rethink it and take a fresh look at it. And so, it's not just, hey, we're doing this and we're just going to continue to do this. So next slide. So there actually are, in the document, you'll see there's 12 purposes to why we're doing the strategic plan. But essentially, here's a kind of the top three. Planning is always good, and it serves as your policy document of what you're doing. It's your blueprint on going forward with things that you can fall back on. Helps you answer those questions. Why are you doing it? Why are you doing it that way? What's the purpose? And it really helps you kind of rethink and get your, what's your mission? What's your agency's vision? What's your agency's goals and objectives? What outcomes do you want? How are you going to measure this? What's your agency's, measurement for success of your program? And again, looking at cost effectiveness, looking at efficiencies. You may have staffing and resources now, but doing this strategic plan helps you kind of look at that and go, well, do we have the right resources? Do we have enough? Do we have the right type of resources and staffing in the right areas? So, in the document, there's 12 of them. One of them is also this document will feed into your marketing plan. So your marketing plan will look at what are your goals and objectives, what are your outcomes that you want, what are your target areas, and then you can develop your marketing plan from there. It also helps that this plan can be part of other plans that your agency is doing. So if you're a transit agency and you're doing a transit development plan or a transit strategic plan, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and do those things together, or at least have this feed into that. Again, this is your agency's plan, not just a program plan. So it's got to be part of your agency. So even if you're not a transit agency, if you're doing some other transportation planning, this is a good tie-in, or another way to get into those other plans too. It's a way to take these commuter assistance programs, to a higher level. All right, next slide. So here I'm going back to data-driven. So it's really the data is driving the plan, not the other way around, right? So you need to do some research. You need to collect some data. The data and the research will show you what are the needs, what are the public needs for commuting options and for information and doing things. How are we going to best help them? What are our target markets? What's the where do we want to really target our areas? What is really needed? So the data is going to show that, and analyzing that data is going to really feed what you do, and not the other way around. And so one of the things we talk about is using a blank slate approach. So imagine if you did not have a program. If you didn't have a program, but you had to create one, how would you do that? What would that look like? What would the resources be? What services would be provided? You wouldn't make that up. You would collect data, do some research, and let that data and research tell you to do that. So a good way to approach is to just kind of like, erase what you're doing now and start over in a way and say, okay, what's the best way to do our program? And another tip, include us in the development process. So check in with us from time to time. We'll be happy to look at drafts, at things that you're doing, data that you're getting. One that helps us, know that you're on the right track, and we don't get to the end and then you give us a plan and we go, well, wait, what about this? Or why didn't you look at this? Or why didn't you look at that? This will help get our feedback throughout the process too. All right, next slide. So again, I'm harping on research and data, but one of the things that in the plan itself, we definitely want to see what research and data you did collect and how you use that to identify the needs and services of your program. And so here are some types of data that are probably good data to kind of use and analyze. Since this is not inclusive, there could be other things that you want to look at, but travel patterns, congested travel times and locations. What's the travel delay in your area? We often get plans and they look at population, but what you really want to look at is work age population, because population includes, little kids, and they're not driving, so we don't have to worry about them yet on our roads, right? So you want to look at work age population probably as a focus. Commute mode splits, auto occupancy, but also things like, how many commuters do we have, living in and working in our service area? How many of them live in our service areas but go outside the service area? How many work in our service area but live outside the service area? So those types of numbers are going to give you some insight on how do you reach these folks and what type of services they may need. Okay, next slide. So who is required to do this? This is the big question. So right now, if you are operating any type of commuter assistance program and you're getting funding from through DRPT for it, whether it be state funding or federal funding, you need to do one of these plans, okay? But if you're an agency that does not have a program and you're not currently getting any state funding or federal funding through DRPT, but you're thinking about doing something in the next year or a couple years from now, then you also need to do a plan. So basically this helps drive a lot of the funding requests, because very similar to the transit agencies, what they do, they develop transit plans, and that helps them develop the grant applications that they need to implement the services that are part of their plan, right? And so similar thing here on the commuter assistance program. If you're not sure if you need to do a plan, call us, email us, we'll let you know. Okay, Miriam, next one. The planning horizon. So the commuter assistance program strategic plan is a 5-year plan. I think originally we were looking at a 6-year plan. The strategic plans for transit, I believe, are 10-year plans. We want to do have this a 5-year plan. One of the things we did hear from folks that 6 years, and maybe you might feel the same way with 5 years, is a little far out to kind of predict the future in a way. And we know planning isn't, once you get past the first year, it gets a little harder to kind of figure out what's the world going to be like, particularly, we just saw that with COVID. But we don't want you to do a full plan every year, because these are big deals. These require some effort, and we obviously don't want you to have to do these every year. So the plan is a 5-year plan. Every 5 years, we want you to do what we call a major update. Oh, basically, it's a new plan. Take another look, develop a new plan, and then minor updates every year. And we'll talk a little bit more about these on the next slides. Okay, next one. So the minor update. So that can be something as short as a letter to DRPT or just a short document to us. But basically, on the minor updates, which we need annually, is anything that changed in your plan, anything that changed in your program of what services you're offering or how you're offering those services or resources or financing or anything. If anything has changed, you need to document that in what we call the minor update in a letter or some small, short document. You don't need to provide and redo the entire plan and provide the whole plan back to us, but annually we need these things if there's any changes, because and that change could be a big Amazon's coming and they're opening up an office next year and there's going to be 30,000 employees. So you might go, that changes what we do or how we do it or our target area, or what areas we prioritize. There might be a big construction project that you might that might change your priorities and where your focus areas are. So those changes are what we want to see annually. And there might be where there's nothing. You just tell us nothing's changed, but then when you apply for a grant, if you have changes in there, we're going to question you. Why, you just told us there was no change, but yet you've got cost for something new. So, keep that in mind. All right, next slide. So every 5 years, again, the plans need to be updated. And then, so we're going to get into information on what actually goes into the plan. Title page, chapters, all through it, and exact data that we want in the plan. So there's a title page. There's another slide that's going to get a little bit more detail on these. But chapter 1 is just your overview, going back to program history, the governance. That's like who oversees your program or your section of your agency. So it's your governing board. It could be a board, the directors, or it could be higher than that. What's your organization structure, and where did the staffing for this program fit in, and your service area. The next chapter is a lot on demographics and characteristics. This is, and existing transit services or other transportation services and facilities, even the ones you don't operate. This is sort of getting a snapshot of what's going on out there. Chapter 3, we get into your agency's strategic vision, goals, and objectives. All right, next slide. Just to reiterate, so this is not just a program plan, but it's your agency's plan, right? It's your agency's organizational plan, and so it's got to be adopted by your board. Just like the transit development plans and the transit strategic plans, those have to be adopted by the board. So that, because the board is you're governing, the people who govern your agency, your board, they need to make a commitment. They're going to make a commitment on resources, on staffing, on funding. They're committed to implementing the program. They're committed to doing, these services and providing these services for the public. So they need to be part of the planning process. They should be, and they're going to have to approve this and say, yes, this is what we want. We are committed to doing this. And so there needs to be some type of a formal board approval or adoption, and that needs to be provided to us so that we understand it was approved. And so, again, I recommend, including your board periodically in updates, letting them know you're working on the plan and including them in the plan itself so that they know what's going on and they can comment and they can provide feedback to you as you go. All right, next. So a little more detail on the title page. We want you to make sure that it says Commuter Systems Program Strategic Plan in it, so we know what it is. The fiscal year is covered by the plan. Little things like, what's the name of your Commuter Systems program? The name you promote to the public. What agency operates the plan? There's always this confusion sometimes over, agencies and programs. So it's your agency that runs the program, and the program has a program name. So we want to know those. Date, when it was approved by your governing board. Okay, next. So chapter 1, again, this is kind of the overview of it. What's the history of your program or your agency? Like, how did it become about that you're going to do some type of program to help with commuters or help the public in their travel needs? So give us some history on that. The governance, who's governing what you're doing and ultimately has the oversight of that and making decisions like financial decisions for like things like matching for grants and things. So who is that? What's your organizational structure, so we could see the staffing and where your program fits into your overall organization. The service area, what areas are you going to serve? And that helps us too, because we are seeing some overlap in service areas, and so we want to get to the heart of those things and figure out why there's overlaps and then who's doing what. And so that's in chapter 1, and again, this is all in the document and the handouts. There's a lot more detail to this, so I'm just kind of giving you the highlights, but there's a lot more detail in there that gives you a better idea of the details we want in all of these chapters. So next slide. So as I mentioned before, chapter 2 is the service area demographics and characteristics. This is kind of where you're going to do some research and data gathering. What's going on now? You know, what's going on out there now? What type of transportation facilities and services are there? You know, what's going on as far as travel patterns and things like that. So you want to get, you know, this is the nitty-gritty of kind of getting all that information to understand your service area, what's going on, so you can then use and analyze that information to figure out what you need to do to provide services and assistance. Okay, next one. Chapter 3 is your agency strategic vision, the goals and objectives of your program, and also fitting into your, you know, again, this is your agency plan, so your agency has it fit into your agency's vision also. And so whenever you do, you know, goals and objectives, I think many of you have heard the acronym SMART, right? They want to be specific, measurable, quantifiable, attainable. So you don't want to, you know, the vision might be more lofty, but once you get the goals and objectives, they need something that you can actually obtain and measure it. They need to be relevant to the program, to your agency, and then time-based, so that there's a way to kind of measure them and evaluate them. Next slide. Chapter 4 then becomes a little bit more detail on your target markets, customers, and we added equity from the original draft a couple of years ago. So target markets are, you know, what are you looking at as far as where you want to, what areas of your service area are you targeting most? This is where you're prioritizing certain things. And I'll probably say this again, but you know, these programs, just like everything, right? It's not unlimited resources or funding. Transit agencies go through this with their plans, right? They don't have unlimited funding to provide service to everyone. So they have to make some trade-offs of what markets and where they want the service to go. And so similar things are going to happen with your plans. You can't be everything to everybody because you just don't have the funding to do that effectively. And we want you to be the most effective. So, you know, this is where you're going to really look at why you're targeting certain markets. Your customers, who are they? What are they? You know, again, we talked about, you know, just using population numbers. You know, that's going to include, you know, children, retired residents who, you know, not are commuting to work. So you're not going to target them for commuting to work type of things, but you need to know that information. And we definitely want you to account for equity, so that how through your planning process and then ultimately in your services are you addressing the equity of all types of communities and demographics and needs. So that just needs to be spelled out. And again, it's not saying you have to serve everyone. There's good reasons, one being you don't have enough funds, but we want to at least make sure that everyone's looking at the needs of all the communities, and so no one's left out, at least of the planning process. And it may be you come up with some things where you've got some different services that you didn't know you needed. All right, next slide. So chapter 5, this is where now you're finally saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. So we collected all that data, we looked at all that, you know, did that research, we looked at all the data, we analyzed the data, we analyzed it, got our needs. Okay, so now these are the services that we're going to provide. We're going to do this, this, and this. This is how we're going to do it. This is the staffing that we're going to use. These are the tools and technologies that we're going to use. So ride matching systems, things like that. You want to show how you're going to use that. And we certainly encourage you to coordinate with other programs, with other agencies running similar programs. Could be transit agencies, could be planning organizations, PDCs, you know, it could be a variety of folks, but we definitely want to see if you're partnering with others and you know, doing things together, which could be more effective. And plus, as we all know, you know, when we started out years ago doing these programs, you know, everyone sort of had their own individual program, but commuters don't always stay within those service areas, right? You've got commuters going from one program area to another program. How are you coordinating that with that other program, with your neighboring program? So that's a big part of this, but chapter 5 is where you're going to tell us what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Okay, next slide. Obviously, we need a financial plan, right? Again, no unlimited budget, so we've got to come up with a plan on financing. Again, this is why your board needs to be involved, because there's got to be some commitment. You know, again, they're not going to say, definitely we're going to fund, you know, this program X amount of dollars, you know, for the next 100 years. But there needs to be some commitment or some understanding that there needs to be a local commitment, right? Everyone has to have skin in the game. So, you know, what's your realistic plan for getting financing to fund all those things you just said you wanted to do in chapter 5? And so that needs to be planned out, identifying, you know, realistic areas of funding. It could be, you know, again, local funding, could be through DRPT, could be some federal funding. Wherever you think that, you know, you can get money realistically, that's going to be in the plan. Again, this is 5 years out, so we want to see that program cost 5 years out. And again, this will help inform any grants that you may apply for also. All right, next slide. Monitoring evaluation. So we're doing all these wonderful things, we're doing great, but how do we know any of this stuff has worked, right? How do we know we're doing a good job? How do we answer that question from the public? Or, hey, we're getting a new administration, right, in Virginia. They're gonna have lots of questions about why are we spending this money? What results are we getting? This is where we need to have that plan on how do we get our information, collect data, how are we measuring this, how we you know, going to prove that we're successful. And so our grant programs have very strict you know, goals for getting cars off the road. And so that certainly should be a part of this, but it could be some other things based on what your agency wants to show also. But how are you collecting the data? How are you measuring that? And how are you showing the results? I mean, this is where you do that in the plan. This is, you know, we can't, this is a very important chapter of the plan. It's as important as anything on how we're looking at, you know, showing that these have a benefit to Virginia, and they're also cost effective too. We're not just, you know, spending a lot of money to get little results. We're spending money to get, you know, a bigger bang for our buck. So that's what you want to do in chapter 7. Okay, next slide. There is an dependency where you can then, so during the other chapters, you are getting the data and you're saying how you're analyzing and using that data to develop your plan. This is, the dependency is then showing all that data that you collected, any research. Here's, again, some of the suggested, but not limited to some of that data. People ask us, well, where do we get this data? You know, VDOT's a good source. We have some data. US Census and the American Travel Survey on the map. If you've done ACT, the Association for Commuter Transportation, or the Commuter Choice certificate training, you have seen a lot of that information on how do we get census data. American Travel Survey data on the map is a great way to show it on, you know, in your area. So you probably are familiar with some of those things, but again, this is not an all-inclusive list. We certainly think there's some other data out there that could be used. Virginia Employment Commission is a good source of workforce data, and where they're coming. That's another way to get that. You know, how many people work in our area and live in our area, and how many work in our area but live outside, etc. So these are some ideas. We'd be happy to, you know, if you've got some other ideas, we'd be happy to talk to you about that if you want. But obviously, if you've got planners in your own agency, they probably could direct you to some other data sources that might be even better to use. So next slide. So what's our timeline? So we're going to give you 2 years to do your plans. And so by January 1st of 2024, we hope that all of you have done and submitted and got a board approval for your plan. And so that gives you 2 years. We're hoping that's plenty of time. If it if anyone's concerned about that, let me know. We'll talk you through it. But the reason why we want to do that is, we got to have some type of deadline. We pushed it off long enough because of COVID. But we also are looking at funding for FY25 to have your plans ready for your funding requests. So you've got a good plan to back up your funding requests for FY25 funding. So that usually starts, in that January of 2024, December 2023. That's when we usually open up the applications for that. Sorry, the little graphic is got over the some of the words there, but what we want from you all is by June 30th of this year, 2022, a schedule for how you're going to do the plan. So and a detailed schedule. So when you're going to start the plan, when you're going to finish the plan. One of the questions we always get: do we need to hire contractors? Again, being a data-driven plan, it could be a good idea for you to get some outside consultants to help get that data for you, but also to analyze that data. What does that data mean, right? It's not just enough to collect it, but you gotta use it. You gotta figure out, what does this mean and how is it guiding the needs and services? So if you're gonna do that, what's your schedule for hiring people? So by the end of this fiscal year, June 2022, we want that schedule. Obviously, we'll take anything before that. So that way we can make sure people have got it in their pipeline to do. And again, you probably need to talk to some folks in your agency about, this type of schedule, particularly if you're going to hire consultants and do some things that way. So we're hoping we're giving you plenty of time to kind of go through your boards to kind of get the resources and things you need to start working on the plan. Okay, next slide. We also get questions about funding. A big source of funding, or these are some sources of funding that can be used, as far as we know, for to develop your plan. We know that DRPT's Technical Assistance Program can be used to do plans. Transit agencies use it all the time for different plans. You can certainly do that. Obviously, applications are open. They're due February 1st. If you're that forward on your schedule, you can apply this year. If your agency receives or can use FTA 5303 planning funds, those can be used for, as the name says, they're planning funds. They're used for transit plans. They can certainly be used for this. And as a general rule, any funding that can be used for a transit plan, we think can be used for this commuter assistance plan. So keep that in mind. There's some federal funding. We looked into CMAQ. We do not think that CMAQ can be used for planning purposes like this. If you get a ruling otherwise from someone at Federal Highways, we'd be glad to take a look at that. Obviously, your local agencies can provide some local planning funds. But like I said, anything that typically is used for transit planning could probably use for these plans. We always get questions about, well, I've got a commuter assistance program operating or a project assistance. Can I use that funding to do my strategic plan? And if you've asked that question, you've received the answer, no. We want to keep operating as operating and not planning. But you may look at, well, I've got the staff person that operates the commuter assistance program, and they're going to help work on the plan. Can I charge their time to the CAP operating? And the answer there is no. Also, we want you to separate that time out. Again, that's an idea to get a technical assistance grant or something, so they can charge their time that they work on planning separately than operating or implementing some type of program or project. So we want to keep those separate. Just to kind of go back on to mention some things, just some high points I want to mention. So obviously, I'm stressing data, right? This is data driven. The data is going to tell you what your needs are and what your services needs are. But analyze the data. So that's the other important part of it, is not just collecting the data and say, oh, and putting at the appendix, here's all the data collected, but what's that data telling you and how are you using it for planning? We want to see that in your plan. And I mentioned trade-offs. So and I'm going to again use transit agencies as the example. So transit agencies don't have unlimited funding. You all for these programs don't have unlimited funding. So there's got to be some trade-offs. So in transit planning, right, they look at, well, do we want to maximize ridership or maximize service coverage for our area? And there's trade-offs to those things, right? And so similar to your resources, you know, you probably don't want to say we're just going to do everything to everywhere. You want to make some trade-offs of where you're going to be most effective. And so it may be, you know, again, using transit, they've got to look at, you know, well, we want to really cover this area. That might not be our highest ridership area, but we definitely want to serve them because they don't have a lot of car ownership, and they don't have a lot of other options. You know, when transit puts in a route, right, they don't just go up and start putting in bus stops where they think it goes. They do planning. They look at ridership numbers. Where do we put that stop that's going to be the most effective, accessible? That's the same thing you guys have to do too with your plans. You've got to look at those things and not just kind of do it, but look at where it's most effective. Where are your employment areas, high density areas, and you know, where are your residential areas? You know, looking at all those things, you know, you can look at it by corridor. That's another good way of planning. And providing services along a corridor that might be a significant corridor or high use corridor. So again, I want everyone to kind of think like planners. Maybe some of you on the call aren't planners, so certainly talk to the planners in your agency about those things. So this is just some of the guidance we can offer. And Miriam, if you go to the next slide, I think that's probably the last slide for us. So you know us. We are here to answer your questions. You know, download that handout document, read that. If you've got questions about how to move forward, not only to begin, but during the process, we certainly want to have good communication about how you're going with the process. You know, if you're you know, to see some of this information. Again, it might not be bad to share things with us so we can not only have knowledge of it and go, yes, you're on the right track, or wait, have you thought about this? But also there may be some good things that we can tell other folks who are going through planning, you know, doing a strategic plan, that we can say, hey, you know, talk to so-and-so over at this agency because they just did something we really think is really key that could be helpful. So we are here to help and answer your questions. We know for some of you, this is a new adventure, and that's a good thing, right? But again, going back to the importance of planning things before we implement things or before we develop programs and implement them is a very good thing. We do that across the board. And, you know, back some years ago, we started to do that for our commuter assistance programs also. And this is just kind of finally continuing that. You know, we had a little pause with COVID, but we're back to doing some good planning that will help our programs be more effective and more efficient. And that's all I have on my presentation. Mira, if we've got any questions, be happy to take them.
Yes, we do have some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Can we use 5303 funds for a match if there is a match?
So say that again. It was a little garbled on my speaker.
Right. Can we use 5303 funds for match if there is a match?
Using 5303 funds to match state funds? I think that's the question. If you're using 5303, we will have to take a look at it. I know that's been a question before. I don't recall the definitive answer on that, but if you're looking at using federal funds to match state funds, it's tricky. So I'm not going to say no, but if you want to follow up with me afterwards, we can get a definitive answer. The problem with using funds from another project, again, you can use 5303 funding to actually do the plan. So in that regard, yeah, you know, you could put that on the plan. So if you're looking at to as a match for say something like technical assistance grant, I'll have to check on that.
Okay. What's the match for the tech assistance grant?
And technical assistance is 50-50, so it's 50% of the project is state funds through DRPT and 50% needs to be local funding.
Okay, we have a few more questions. If we were to get funds from the DRPT Tech Assistance Program, can we charge staff time to those funds, or can they only be used for contractors?
No, you can charge your time to that too.
Okay. I'm just reading here. With a CAP that includes multiple agencies, Life Solutions, is it the anticipation of DRPT that the CAPSP be developed collectively across agencies, meaning developed and adopted collectively?
So yeah, good question. So these are individual agency plans. So the board of your individual agencies, even though you're sharing a program name and a program brand, your individual agencies have to adopt the plan. And there needs to be a carve out of this is what your agency is committing to and wants to see. So certainly there is room in one of those chapters for that coordinated effort. How are you doing things with other agencies? And so, but keep in mind, this is your particular agency's plan on what they want your agency to do as far as the resources from your agency goes and their vision and their goals. So it really needs to be from the agency. But again, there's place in the I think it's chapter 4, where you can put in how you're coordinating with other agencies on that. And so I think that's where you can do that. Well, we're all part of one umbrella kind of brand and program, and this is how we coordinate. But each one of your agencies will have to submit a plan and have each one of your agencies board adopt that plan.
Okay, that's it for the written questions. We now welcome live comments. If you would like to provide a comment or have questions, please raise your hand in the attendee panel, and we will unmute your line and call on you when it's your turn to speak. And please state your name and agency when you are called on. You will have 3 minutes to provide your comment, and we will move on to the next person in the queue. Okay, right now we have one hand raised. Amanda, I will unmute you. And you'll just need to unmute yourself.
Oh, my name is Amanda. I'm with the Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Commission. I didn't actually have a question. I just clicked the button because I thought it was going to link me somewhere. My bad.
That's okay.
No problem.
Good to hear you.
Thank you.
I'm checking to see. Okay, we do have another question here. Kelly, you'll just need to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Kelly Hitchcock from Central Virginia Planning District, Ride Solutions. So I have a follow-up question to the one that I typed. And it's just to kind of get some clarity on the strategic plan. I understand that each agency, in our case, you know, the Central Virginia PDC, would have to adopt. But you know, I'm wondering, like Ride Solutions, you know, it's 4 PDCs. So if we have a strategic plan that has completely different marketing targets or marketing plans, but we from the public are seen as one agency, it seems that that can't work. So I'm just curious if that's kind of what I was getting at. Is it a expectation that the data, or in developing some long-term strategic plans, there has to be some continuity across, or that's not necessarily the case? And the reason I ask that, to see whether there's an opportunity to kind of create some economies of scale in developing the plan. That yes, each agency has to have, you know, an input and adopt it, but is there an opportunity to kind of use it to be developed collectively across agencies from a funding standpoint and a continuity standpoint?
Yeah, good question. I know we've been talking to you guys for a while about this, but it definitely needs, so let me put it this way. So your area, the Lynchburg region, right, Central Virginia PDC, right, you're going to have target areas that you're going to serve, right? You know, the other agencies that are part of Ride Solutions aren't serving your area, you're serving your area. And your agency is adopting that. So that's some differences. Now there could be an overall, you know, you can share common goals and visions and things. But when it comes down to what is your agency going to do, because you're getting a separate grant from DRPT for what your specific agency does, you need to spell that. So this isn't a document for, you know, that the public is going to see and kind of get confused. Well, wait, it's all Ride Solutions, but I'm talking to people in Lynchburg because that's where I work. So there is some separate, you know, your agencies aren't doing the same things and don't have the same targets areas and things like that. So there needs to be that separation of what are you doing as part of the, you know, 1/4 of Ride Solutions, and then, you know, New River Valley is going to do what they're doing to their customers and their target areas in their area, and West Piedmont on theirs, and Roanoke and theirs. So there needs to be that separation of what each agency is doing to implement. And it could be, you know, again, there could be a lot of shared elements of the plan and say, we're doing this part because this is our service area. So you could do it that way. But again, we don't want to, it isn't just it's not an operational plan of just, you know, Ride Solution is this, and we serve customers, the public, and we provide, you know, ride matching options and things like that. It is a strategic plan on how are you targeting, you know, the areas that you want to serve, whether it be residential, employer, both. So does that make it a little clearer? I see where you're going, but
yes, I get that part. So there's an anticipation, obviously, that'll have the autonomy where it's targeting the specific areas or the data-driven information that shows where you're going to need this based on data. But there's that opportunity to do the collective side on where you might be talking about marketing or messaging or those kind of things. And there's an opportunity to do it that way if that's desired. Got it. Thank you. Very helpful.
And I'm not sure if you asked this or not, but if you wanted to pool your resources and say, we're going to hire one consultant that's going to do the plan for all 4 agencies as a whole, that's fine too, as long as they, you know, separate out the plans to say, well, Central Virginia, this is your plan because this is your service targets and what you're going to do, and this is what New River Valley is going to do. But you can share the same consultant if that, you know, that could help with the common aspects of the plan, which you'll probably have some.
Thank you. Very helpful. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised at this point. If you do have a question and you're unable to talk to us for some reason, just give you a minute to ask your question.
And why people are raising their hand or typing. So just to reiterate, it is a draft. At this point, it's got to go through Virginia's Town Hall for public comment. So I would say if anyone on the, you know, wants to provide some feedback on that document, again, we don't anticipate making major changes, but, you know, some tweaks. If something's not clear, we certainly can do that before we finalize it. Once we get the go-ahead from Town Hall, we will be finalizing that. But you can use it for now if you want to look at, you know, again, it's not going to be major changes. It's going to be pretty much what it is now, just probably some tweaks if we need to explain something better. So, you know, before this month's out, if you guys want to give us a comment, or we'll be able, you know, we'll be glad to accept comments to the end of January.
All right, well, that is all of our questions for today.
All right, you have our contact information if you think of any others as you go through the process.
Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.